Ready.
Welcome to episode 50 of the Go Get 'em Agility podcast. My name is Margaret Hughes, and I'm your host. Today I'm going to talk about Zanee Agility Camp. Me and Eli went to summer camp. We went to agility summer camp. I had a comment on something that I posted with the question mark, agility camp? Yes, there are agility camps. There are agility camps across the nation, the United States. I know that there's an agility camp up in Canada as well. So I'm going to explain what Zanee Agility Camp is, give you a little highlights of what I loved, what I learned, and my opinion on whether or not this is something for everybody. So a little history. Way back in the late 90s or the early 2000s, my very first agility camp was through Power Pause. So Nancy Guys and Jim Basic ran Power Pause camps. I'm not sure if they still do. I know they're pretty busy people, so I'm not sure. But Power Pause was my first introduction to agility camp, and it definitely set a precedence for my love for the format of how agility camp runs. Fast forward 20-something years. Now I've attended my second Zanee Agility Camp with Eli. Last year he was only all of 10 months, I think. So he was very young. We didn't do any contacts. We were jumps and tunnels, and our jumps were set at 8 inches. So it was mostly just a little bit of sequencing, a little bit of handling, but mostly just getting him comfortable with the environment, because the environment is very trial-like, which is one of the things that I love about it. It's a controlled, trial-like environment that can highlight how overwhelming the environment can be to dogs. And I learned a lot about him, and I think he learned a lot of really positive stuff that he can work around and within the chaos that can feel like a trial environment. So how does it run? Zanee Agility Camp runs over 3 days. There are 6 instructors. Well, they've done a couple of different formats. I'm going to talk about this year's format. I thought it was really well run. So this year's format, 6 instructors over 3 days. You meet up with each instructor once for 2.5 hours each time. And then there's 3 rotations, and you rotate into each instructor once, and one of those rotations is a break. So you're given 2.5 hours to do whatever you want to do. You can go and join into another group if you buy another round. So each round is sold individually if there's room. And so you can go jump into another instructor for a second time, which some people did. I did not. I was working. So one of the things that lets me afford it is that I worked the camp. So on my rotation break, I gave Eli a break, but I was working. I was doing lunch, just doing snacks for the judges, miscellaneous stuff to help keep the camp running smoothly. So for Zanee Agility Camp, there were 6 rings. Each instructor had their own ring. And 2 rings were inside, 4 rings were outside. We had pretty good weather. We had rain on one day. It was raining more when we were walking, a little bit of drizzle, so not unsafe for the dogs, I didn't think. And the grass was cut perfectly, which just gave some wonderful grip for the dogs. It was just enough length for them not to be slipping on it, which was awesome. The camp is split into 7 groups. I was grouped up. Eli and I were grouped up with 3 other dogs. So we had 4 dogs total in our group, which was on the smaller side. Some groups had upwards of 7 dogs in their group. So I was grouped up with 3 other dogs, all very young dogs, skilled dogs. They all had some skills, and the handlers range from, this was their, I don't know, second, third, fourth dog, and then one handler, this was her second agility dog. So skilled handlers, they knew what they were doing. They knew all their front crosses, their side changes, and all that. And the dogs were all experienced in skills. They haven't had a whole lot of coursework experience. All right, so day one, first instructor was Ashley Deacon. We were inside on turf. And the main highlight with Ashley that really sat with me is his description of the front cross versus the blind cross and the rear cross. So we are working a line that really could not effectively put in a front cross easily. But the rear cross option and the blind cross option were definitely two options that we could do. What he said is that when you are running the blind cross and when you are running the rear cross, you're running on the same line, the same drive line for the handler in each one of those. The difference is, for the blind cross, the dog needs to stay committed to the obstacle you're coming from. And for the rear cross, the dog needs to stay committed to the obstacle you're going to. So both of them have an element of commitment on the dog's part. Of course, the handler has to set the correct obstacle, either for the blind cross, the obstacle you're coming from, or the rear cross, the obstacle you're going to. Or the handler's line that you run is effectively the exact same line. For the most part, right? There's always going to be exceptions for every side change. But for the most part, that was holding true for the sequence that we were on. Whereas the front cross is a positional side change. So the handler gets into a position to affect how the dog turns or when the dog turns. And so those are two different ways to look at those three side changes. The blind cross and the rear cross, the handler has the same handling line. The front cross is a positional, is a position that the handler needs to get into to affect a well-timed front cross or create a turn that you want from your dog. The second instructor that I went to was Stephanie Rainier. We were outside on grass. It was a nice sunny day. I definitely felt that her course was the most difficult for the skills that Eli had. So Eli's backside slices are not very strong. I haven't put a whole lot of effort into training those yet at speed. And one thing that I did find between Stephanie's course and Tanner Dogan's course and then Grace Heck's course, each one of those courses had a tunnel to a backside. And what I found out in going to camp, by the time that I got to Grace's, so it went Stephanie, then I went to Tanner, then I went to Grace in that order. And what I found by the time that I got to Grace's course and hit my third tunnel to a backside and Eli was failing or not understanding what I was asking of him, even though his verbals are really good, what I learned is that his tunnel being blind to me and then going into a backside was very difficult for him. He was going from a tunnel and an obstacle that was blind to him, going into a backside was very difficult for him. He needed to check in with me first, or he wanted to check in with me first, which put him just slightly enough off a good backside line. And so then he was purely on verbal and having to change his lead slightly to having to change his lead to effectively get a correct backside. And these were on, Stephanie's was on a backside slice, Tanner's was on a backside slice, and Grace's was on a backside wrap. So each one of them he struggled with getting. And I'll get more into Grace's, where we went with Grace. So I'm still on Stephanie. So Stephanie's was difficult. So that was one of the first difficult things. Basically, her course design was dubbed "Don't Take the Tunnel." So that tells you that there were quite a few tunnel traps and working jumps very close in proximity to a different tunnel. She had 4 tunnels, I think, on her course. So finding the correct tunnel entrance when we did want it, but then finding the correct jump. So her course definitely highlighted some obstacle discrimination for me. So depending on how far in, Eli definitely got better as we progressed. All right, so day 2, we started outside with Tanar Dalton. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. There's definitely a way to pronounce his name that is difficult for me. He's okay, though. I understand that if you call him Tanner, he's okay with that. Tanar's course a little bit blew my mind, and it blew my mind how well Eli did. So he had us walking. Now, remember that these are inexperienced dogs, and he literally helped us walk a course, I think that was up to obstacle 34, I think, maybe 32. 32 obstacles. I have never walked a 32 obstacle course. So my mind was a little bit blown when we went past 22. And he's like, we're going to keep going. So, but the way that he talked about how he would handle stuff was really, really good. I really enjoyed his thought process, a little insight into sequences that he finds tough and that he enjoys seeing dogs accomplish. A number of layers, dog walk layers that Tanar had us do. What I really liked about Tanar's, there are a couple of things that I really, well, first off, my tunnel to my backside, I liked the way that was highlighted. And then Tanar helped explain a couple of different ways that I could help Eli learn how to do that. And so did Grace. And so both of those were very effective. One for Tanar, one of the ways that he suggested that I work the backside, coming off the tunnel to the backside, is move the jump closer. So it takes away Eli's ability to cut in to the front side of the jump. That was one option. The other option was to make the jump more front facing. So it wasn't quite as offset, making the backside more difficult. So bringing the backside and making it a little bit more of a front side for Eli as opposed to a true backside. One of the other things that I really liked about Tanar that we worked on was different strategies and how our position affects our dog's jump line. And so we had I think it was a 3 jump sequence into a tunnel with an the middle jump was slightly offside. So it was a slice jump. It wasn't a backside. It wasn't difficult for the dog, but it was a slice jump. And we could run either side of that slice jump. So either having the dog jump into us and then push a little bit for the tunnel, or start on the dog on one hand, blind cross as they're approaching, and bring them up on the other hand for the tunnel entrance. And so we worked both of those, seeing how the side change on the middle slice jump affected our dog's ability to stay committed and jump effectively for that slice jump without overshooting it, causing a harder line to the tunnel. So I really like that he showed us both of them. We worked not only with me in a stopped position, but me with, so a stopped release, but also a running release, which all of them worked for Eli, but it was certainly highlighted how it changes his positioning and how it changes his speed, how it changes his jumping effort. So just highlighting that. And it also highlighted that he was able to come out and find a jump as a layer off the dog walk. On Tanar's course, we also worked 3 different weave pull entries. A 90-degree off the dog walk, which Eli nailed. I was so happy with that. And then a layer, dog walk layer, so throwing the dog through a tunnel and into a very difficult layer weave pull entrance. And while Eli nailed the entry, he didn't stay in, and we ran out of time. As a local competitor with aspirations to do this international stuff, but not actually be on an international team, one of the great things about camp is that the instructors push you. They push you beyond, or they pushed me anyway, they pushed me beyond my normal comfort zone, what I normally would throw myself in practice, try things that I wouldn't try normally. What I loved about Tanar's course is it highlighted some skills that I have been training in my own backyard. They highlighted that they are starting to hold together in a bigger environment, in a little bit more pressure on bigger courses. So that was a lot of fun to see that I have some skills, Eli has some skills that we've been training for, but haven't really put to the test. So that was a lot of fun. In the afternoon on day 2, we were with Shauna Oliver outside on grass. And in Shauna Oliver's course, I really liked her course. I thought it was really well laid out. I thought it had some really good challenges. She offered up a conversation that a little bit blew my mind in the beginning. I'm starting to wrap my head around her thought process, although I haven't put it really into play yet. I've done a little bit, but not a whole lot. So what I'm about to say is still a little undecided for me. However, I see why she's going where she's going. I'm just not 100% sure I'm on board yet. So let me see if I can explain this, because it was a little difficult for me to understand. So we were working on threadle wraps, and the threadle wrap came off on a slice jump. So as a threadle wrap, so pulling the dog into you, you're going to stay on the landing side of the jump while you wrap your dog around the backside. But the dog should land and take the jump and land on a slice. All right, so dog's on my right. I'm going to pull them with my left hand on a threadle wrap. Well, this is how I do it. Dog is starting on my right. I'm going to threadle wrap them to the back side of the left wing, and they're going to jump in a slice towards the right wing. We're going to another jump to the right of that threadle backside wrap jump. So when the dog takes the threadle wrap, we want them to jump on a slice, continuing our right direction, our right side direction. I mean, dog's now on my left because we did a side change on the threadle wrap. So dog ends up on my left hand after the slice jump. And Shauna recommended, or Shauna suggesting, that when we're giving our hand signal, we're giving our hand signal for the threadle wrap, which for me is my off hand coming across my body, trying to grab my dog's nose and pull them around. That's my backside throttle wrap hand signal. But she suggested that my verbal be that I use for an inside slice, for a throttle slice. So my throttle wrap cue is wrap. My throttle slice cue is in. So she's suggesting that I combine the throttle wrap hand signal with my throttle slice verbal. So I'm going to let it sit like that. So again, I haven't done any more training since camp to look at that, to evaluate that. But I think that it's an interesting concept. And the point of doing this combination of cues is if you have a throttle wrap cue and you have a throttle slice cue, the takeoff point that you want your dog to set for takeoff should be different. The wrap, the dog should square up to the jump and lift in a bend back in the direction you want them to go, back towards you. Whereas a slice, they will take off a little bit earlier, and the extension is different than the collection for the wrap. So a wrap is collection, a slice is more extension, a relative collection is more extension, and so the takeoff point for the dog should be different. Now, most folks, most dogs, naturally, and this is even true with Eli, who has had a lot of collection training, but under pressure and with a lot of speed, he will do what is called diving, which means that he will jump a wrap in a slice, in more extension, and turn on landing. And what I want is for him to turn before the bar, before the lift, and bend in the correct direction. And so you have this difference between diving and turning back towards you versus true collection where they turn before the bar. And so Shauna's argument for this, using the combination of your throttle hand signal and your verbal slice signal, throttle slice signal, is that you'll get the collection for the first part of the turn, but they will set their feet to take off in a different position than they would for a throttle wrap verbal cue. So it's kind of working both sides of the jump. The hand signal for the pulling them in and getting the correct side of the jump, and then the verbal tells them how they're going to jump, how they're going to lift, where they're going to set their feet, and how and where they're going to land. So I quite like that. It really made me think, and I love thinking about how agility and our signals and our cues affect the dog. So I really appreciated that. I thought it was a very challenging mind thing for me, which I appreciated. And I started talking about it with my daughter and discussing it. For a new person, I don't think that they have all the verbals that are necessary yet to even have this conversation. So for a new person, I wouldn't worry about this conversation, but I definitely think if you are looking to advance your handling up into Premier and more technical courses, then definitely something to keep in mind, something to think about, and start strategizing with your own dog. Now for day 3. My first instructor was Grace Heck. We were indoors on turf. Grace's course, it challenged distance and verbals. So distant verbals with a distance element to it, which I thought was awesome. Eli has a brilliant throttle wrap cue. So verbal throttle wrap cue. So he did very well on the first part of Grace's course. And then in the second section of her course, there was an option to take a jump. It was an offset serpentine. And the third jump, there were, 2 different ways to come off the jump. So, and depending on where the handler, went. And so Grace had us try it 3 different ways, which I really appreciate. So the same 3 jumps, working 3 different ways to get onto the third jump, and then into a tunnel. She timed me. She timed the 3 different ways and calculated which way worked better for Eli, which way was faster for him. I really liked seeing that Eli could handle and transition all 3 ways. Some of them highlighted ways that he preferred. She also timed us, and so it also highlighted which way was faster if I was looking to shave off half a second here, half a second there. So that was really going to quite like that. But the big takeaway for Grace's course is she had a tunnel to a backside wrap. And just like in Tanar's course and Stefanie's course, Eli was struggling with tunnel to a backside. And so Tanar had a strategy for me. For Stefanie's course, he was doing okay if he didn't get the tunnel trap. So we didn't really talk much about the backside on Stefanie's course because he was actually pulling too much. And so the tunnel was helping me to get him onto the backside. It was more about keeping him out of the tunnel on Stefanie's course. But for Grace's course, it was a tunnel to a backside wrap, and he couldn't get it. He just kept pulling in, looking at me, which put him way off the line for the backside. So she broke it down, and first, can he get it just from the exit of the tunnel? So I put him on my side. He was in left heel position, left side. And could he go from my heel position to the backside? And he could. He did that just fine. So that wasn't the problem. He knows his verbals. So that worked really well. Then she had me do it with me being in front of him, coming out of the tunnel to the backside. And he did that as well. So if I was in front of him, he was fine. But if I was behind him on the tunnel exit, he was struggling. And so we did first, no tunnel, backside, got it. Then we did tunnel with me being in front of him, cueing him to the backside, got that. Then we broke it down to me being behind the tunnel exit to the backside. And I can't remember if he got that first one or if I had to do it again. But that's where the breakdown of his skills level was. So it was me being behind the exit. And so what he wanted to do is come out of the tunnel, locate me, which put him on a difficult line to get to the backside again. And so his verbal's good, but that check-in to the backside, that time that it takes to do that, he struggled with. We worked that, and I told her I really appreciated her breaking it down like that. So just breaking it down and building backwards, and then we finally put it back onto the jump prior, tunnel, and backside, and he nailed it. So that was really good to see how the progression of that, and I appreciated that she did that for him because I definitely would have done the exact same thing with him at home. And then we went to Keller. So day 3, last instructor was Keller, and my daughter joined me on that last one, and she ran Eli a little bit in Casey's course, which was a lot of fun to see. He ran really well for her. The main thing that in Casey's, the main takeaway for me, well, there are a number. I really enjoyed Casey's courses. Really enjoyed the challenges that she offered. But the main thing, we were talking about throttle wraps. And she said something that really resonated with me. And I took this information. I'm like, why haven't I been saying this the whole time? Because I just really love this bit of information. And so we were talking about hand signals, and we were talking about threadle wraps, and she laid out the following scenario. She said, I want you to imagine that the room is dark. The course, the arena is dark. And the only way for your dog to know where they're going is to put a flashlight path on the ground. She said, hold the flashlight, turn it on, and that path that is highlighted with your hand signal, with your flashlight hand signal, is the path you want your dog on. And as soon as she said flashlight, the room's dark, you're using a flashlight to direct your dog's path with your hand signal. The room literally went dark, the course literally went dark, and I saw a flashlight illumination on the ground. And I absolutely loved it, because where I was pointing my flashlight was exactly where I want my hand when I am cueing my dog. Whether it be for a threadle wrap or a forward send, is wherever that beam of light is being illuminated with my hand signal is where I want my dog's path to be. So essentially my beam is anywhere from a foot in front of their nose, maybe even a couple of inches, but a foot in front of their nose to several feet, if not 10, 20 feet, if I'm doing some forward sends for my dog. And she said, if your flashlight's pointing up to the ceiling, you're not giving nearly the amount of information that your dog needs, that if you're pointing the flashlight illumination right at the jump. So I really appreciated that. I really like that. And want to use that terminology in the future. Let's talk about who would benefit from camp. What type of dogs, what type of handlers. It really depends. It really depends on what you want out of the camp. I think that if you go in with the mindset that this is a learning opportunity from some of the top handlers in our country and in other countries, so some of the instructors were from Canada, that you'll take more from it than you would if you go in expecting to nail their courses. You'll get more out of it if you go in with a learning mentality rather than trying to nail their courses, trying to perfect their courses. Because the courses that they set out are difficult. They are, or at least the ones this year and last year, they're meant to challenge you. They're meant to stretch your ability. However, that being said, I think that the caliber of instructor that Zanee Camp brings in, they can almost instantly recognize that things are too hard, and they will immediately make it easier for either the dog or the handler, depending on which one's struggling. And so there are some things that are dog training problems, and the instructor I saw would bring it right down to the dog's skill set level. And then they would also push handlers to go a little bit outside of their comfort zone. And if the handler wasn't able to nail it, just give a little bit of change to the way that they were instructing or setting up the course, help the competitor succeed. So I personally think that at least one class for one day is worth it for anybody. That where their dogs know everything, right? You have to be at least to the point where you can sequence a course, right? Your dog has to understand the equipment, but they don't have to know everything. So like you can completely avoid the dog walk and the teeter and the weed pulls if your dog's never done them before or if they're struggling with them. So they don't insist that you go up and above your dog's ability or up and above your ability. So they'll meet you where you're at, they'll meet you where your dog's at, but then they'll find that line and they'll push on it a little bit, which I think is exactly what a good instructor should do. I think that they should push a handler a little bit outside of their comfort zone. I do think that 3 days might be too much for some novice A handlers. For some. I think it really depends on the mentality that you go in with it. If you see it as a learning opportunity, if you see it as a way to grow your skills and get different eyes on you than your regular instructor, I think that you'll come away with some very valuable information. I think that being in a competition, at least where ours is, we're in our competition arena. So inside and outside, we do competitions both inside and outside in the exact same area that we were doing the lessons. So I think the value of being on competition turf or on competition grass, on competition equipment is very valuable, if only to see how does my dog handle life in this new environment. How does my dog handle the equipment in this new environment? How does my dog handle the equipment with me under a little bit of stress in this new environment? How does my dog handle the other dogs that I'm teamed up with? And outside, the rings are see-through. They're sheep fencing. And so the dogs can see the dogs on the other side running in their courses. And so while they may not be able to get to them, I didn't see any dogs exit the rings this year. I did last year. But this year, I think the dogs handled it really, really well. If I was to change anything, the only thing that I would change two things. One, I would love a camp. I would love a camp where the instructors are talking to us and instructing us how they instruct their novice A handlers. That would be one. So really breaking down how they do their foundation for their novice A handlers and the route that they go. But again, that's a limited, more like an APDT conference. That is a limited number of people are actually instructors that attend these. And so I don't know that they would have the same ability to do that with the lower numbers. But I would love to go to an instructor camp, one, and I think that this would be very valuable for any young student, really. But how do you teach your beginner students all the moves and where to put the emphasis on for young dogs and young handlers, more inexperienced handlers? Where do you put the emphasis for side changes, for different skill sets for your novice A handlers? The only other thing that I would change is I would have at least one, if not two, courses, instructors that didn't make it with an international flair. So going more along the lines of masters, HeckCasey masters, or maybe master series. I think that these were above master series courses, maybe right around the lines of A2, A3, instead of making them pretty difficult, challenging training courses that really had skill after skill after skill, technical after technical after technical, for the more inexperienced handlers and the younger dogs, just bringing it down a notch, which some did at the end of their lesson. Like the last sequence that we ran was really fast, or just a little bit less technical, and so not only was the handler able to do it, but so was the dog. So just a little bit more of that, not much, because I really enjoyed being pushed out of my comfort zone. But I think that 6 instructors in a row pushing you out of your comfort zone, it's a little nice to have one that isn't pushing quite as hard as the rest. To wrap things up, is Zanee Agility Camp for everybody? I think it's getting close for everybody. Those that are sequencing, running courses, know all their equipment or most of their equipment, definitely. I think it is for young dogs with, it's for young dogs with limitations, right? So working at their skill level, at their jump level, not pushing them too much, but the exposure is definitely worth it. I think that for novice A handlers, for young dogs that are a little intimidated by the 3 days, 6 instructors, pick one day, one instructor, and then if your dog does really well, see if there's an opening for the next day or the day after that with one instructor. So picking 1 or 2 instructors over 2 days or 3 days, I think is very, very beneficial. And I think it's slightly different than just going to a half-day seminar in that you get to see how your dog is going to interact with almost 80 different people there. So a little bit more trial-like, but seminar material. So safer, food's allowed, toys are allowed, and your instructor will help you. It's not a trial. So I think it's really good exposure for that and to get a feel for how your dog is going to do in a more intense environment. All right, I think that's it. Happy training. Go get 'em. Woof, woof.